All right, welcome everyone to Monthly on Mondays. This is our first session for the 2025 academic year. And tonight is going to be Mohammad, Helmy, and myself talking about merits and promotions for both Senate and HS clinical faculty combined. Most of the process is similar, so we'll get started right away and just give you a brief overview that there are Senate and HS clinical lines in the School of Medicine. And so depending on what your position is, you have Associate Deans Kyoko Yokomori and myself, or Mohammad Helmy and Namisha Parek, and Sonia Seagal as Assistant Dean in the HS Clinical Series. So the org chart, Senior Associate Dean for Academic Personnel that we are all under is Jeff Abbott, and then it flows to Senate and non-Senate, and then there's various analysts who are going to help you with your file review and help your department with file review. Very important that you're actively involved in file review. And what we'll cover today then is with a set of slides for School of Medicine Senate faculty and adjunct faculty, so inline, in residence, and clinical X folks. And then also Mohammed's going to chime in with differences that pertain to HS clinical faculty. So I will point out that this information was covered back in March of 2024, and that session is on the website, so you can review that recording, or this recording tonight as well will be up on the website in about a month. And so that we're all using the same language when we're talking about academic personnel review. We refer to ranks as assistant, associate, or full professor. And then within those ranks, there are steps. So the steps are the various levels at each rank, and each rank has a different number of steps. And that can be seen on this chart here. So if you look to the first column, assistant professor series has steps 1 to 6, and steps 5 and 6 overlap with the associate professor series. And associate professors have 5 steps, and then you finally move to full professor with 9 steps. And after the 9th step, you go to an AS or above scale, if you should be so lucky and have been here that long. So this chart is also available on the Associate Dean's website, and it shows the number of years that you will be at the various steps. And as you get to an associate professor 4, 4 and 5 are reviewed every 3 years, full professors every 3 years until they get into the step 9 and above scale years as well. So how is it that you go up for a merit or a promotion? There are very standard evaluation criteria. You are evaluated on your teaching and mentoring. And this is teaching not just of medical students, but of graduate students, residents, interns, anyone that is getting instruction and evaluation from you. Then you're evaluated on your creative activities. If you're in the Senate category, this is your research program, your federally funded, hopefully, research program, your production of peer-reviewed publications. And then everyone is also reviewed for service to their department, to their school, to the campus, and then to beyond the campus to professional recognition nationally and or internationally. And if you're in a HS clinical or clinic series, you're also evaluated on your clinical competence. And I would just point out, Mohammad, feel free to chime in at any time when you have something to add or correct.
Thanks, Brian.
So above scale, this has changed in the last year or so. Basically, above scale is now set to a specific number of years that you have to be at a various above scale step. And then if you go to the next step up, you're getting a fixed salary increase. And this will be on the website. I'm not going to cover this in detail tonight because it affects a very few number of faculty. But just know that the above scale series has now been changed to having steps above scale, basically. So what is the review process? And the review process always starts with the candidate, that you're responsible for pulling together information, updating your CV, translating some of that data into the AP10 form, writing a research statement, a teaching statement, a service statement. Diversity and inclusive excellence is optional. It's only required during your initial appointment. So you prepare this initial set of information and you are combining that with the dossier that your department pulls together. And then that information goes to a department review committee and evaluation. So the department and your committee in the department review your file and make a recommendation for a merit or a promotion. And they pass that recommendation on to a dean level review and recommendation. So that dean level review is really the critical thing to cover here, is that these are School of Medicine advisory committees. So depending on whether you're in line in residence or clinics, your file is going to go to ARAC, CXAC, or CFAC. These are the subcommittees of the dean's delegation. And those subcommittees meet, they evaluate your file, and they're trying to look at your accomplishments and your research, your teaching, and your service, and put that into context of all other departments and other, because it's very hard to compare across departments. So inside the School of Medicine, we're better equipped to evaluate that than outside in the main campus. So these committees are very important to giving a feedback to the campus committee, the campus academic personnel committee, but also in the case of dean delegated merit increases, these committees just pass the file on then to Kyoko or Mohammad and for their evaluation about being a dean delegated merit increase. If this is a promotion or a non-dean delegated file, then it goes on to the vice provost for review and the committee on academic personnel. And that committee on academic personnel is a committee that has been constituted from all the schools on campus. So each school nominates at least 2 individuals to be on that committee. And your file is reviewed by folks in engineering and the School of Law and business and humanities and individuals from the School of Medicine. So you really want to have your file prepared in a way that folks who are not expert matter in the field can still understand your file. So the Council on Academic Personnel will then vote on your file and send that decision to the vice provost. Typically, the vice provost would agree with that decision, but they can forward that on to the provost for a final decision and up to the chancellor. So there are multiple levels of review and reevaluation, and any one of those levels of review can be reevaluated if necessary.
I would add one thing to that slide, Brian.
Please do.
Just clarification if we can go back. The top part before it gets to the dean's office, that can vary and look different from department to department, depending on what the department's policies and internal procedures are. There are, some actions that require a department level vote and some that do not. The department may convene a merits and promotions committee that is not comprised of all faculty, or they may conduct a process with all faculty participating. So if you compare notes between departments with colleagues, for example, you may find that it's not identical. What happens at the department level before a final recommendation comes up to the dean's office. But in the end, the required input is the same across the board, regardless of how you get there. So there's a department evaluation letter required. There are department votes based on the bylaws of the department that are required. If there are external referee letters that are required, all departments must submit those. So while the top half may differ, in the end, depending on how we arrive at the same conclusion as to what's submitted to the dean's office.
All right, thank you for that clarification. And just to further highlight that, the initial appointment or a change of series or a promotion, these are all reviewed by, if you're in line in residence, 50/50 or adjunct faculty, they're all reviewed by ARAC. And if you're clinics or HS clinical, this should also say, if you're HS clinical, you're not reviewed by ARAC, but you're reviewed by either CXAC or CFAC. Okay, and for the analysts that are in the audience and for faculty who are thinking I'm going up for a merit or promotion this year, these are the firm deadlines. You should know these. for 2025 that you should be meeting in March, maybe as late as April, but March you should be meeting with your chair and talking about the proposed actions coming up for this year. Then what a list of proposed actions should be submitted to the Academic Affairs Office by May 1st. And if necessary for promotions or advancement above scale, the solicitation letters of recommendation, solicitation of those letters has to be sent out by June 1st. Now, you as the faculty member, you're not involved in sending out the solicitation letters. That's your department's job to do, but that's the deadline for your department to make sure that that's gotten underway. And then next comes the Academic Affairs Office starts accepting files in August. And then depending on what the action is, if it's a postponement or if it's a merit with a 1-year acceleration, et cetera, or no change, those due dates, those files are due October 6th. If it's a promotion for a normal or it's accelerated promotion, by November 3rd. And if it's a promotion for non-faculty, non-reappointments or above scales, it's December 2nd. So these are the deadlines for this upcoming year.
And these are actions that will become effective July 2026.
2026, correct. Right. And then also note, if you're going up for an acceleration, you can't go past that March 3rd, 2025 date to get that started. Folks need time to be involved in reviewing acceleration. All right, so what is the evaluation cycle? So for an assistant professor, these steps are deemed delegated except for the mid-career appraisal, or if you're doing an acceleration. So as you enter the academic ranks, and let's say you're a step 1 or a step 2, every 2 years you're getting evaluated and going up for a merit increase. But in years, when you're a step 3 or a step 4, then your file is going to go for a mid-career appraisal. And that mid-career appraisal is like a regular promotion file. It's not actually a promotion, but it's a pre-promotion review. And so that's going to be going through all levels, including on to CAP. CAP's going to give that individual feedback on their readiness to be promoted to an associate professor or not. And so that goes to CAP. And then typically after 6 years in the assistant professor rank and absolutely no more than 8 years, so there's an 8-year up or out rule, you are going to be going up to your promotion to associate professor. Now, you may have used, you had to stop the clock or a COVID stop the clock, and that could add 2 to 3 years to this cycle if you've used to stop the clock.
The variation on this for HS is that we have been able to keep most of these final decisions contained at the School of Medicine level. So the HS files do not go to CAP. They are managed at the School of Medicine level, with the exception of files that are very late or even marginally late. We may lose that delegation to manage them at the school level, and they may need to go to campus for the vice provost review.
So get your files in on time.
Yeah, that's the main message. Very good.
Is the best method, yes. All right, and so at the associate professor, there's 6 years is normal to be at an associate professor level. So let's say you were a step 5 assistant and you were promoted, you'd be promoting from a step 5 to a step 2 in the associate professor series, and then 6 more years before you end up going for a full professor step. So these are the step reviews and the overlaps all documented in this chart. Promotions, again, are always going to be CAP reviewed. And then the others, every other normal merit is deemed delegated. And I believe, Mohammad, that's the same at the HS level?
So yeah, at HS, again, we are able to retain most of the final decisions within the School of Medicine. And so you'll hear me say it again, assuming files are not late, then we can retain that delegation to have final decisions at the school level. And if we're not successful in terms of being timely with our reviews and submissions, then they have a chance of going up to campus for additional review.
All right. Thank you. And then just to illustrate that at the full professor level, you're going for your merits every 3 years, and every other one is dean delegated. That's what DD stands for on this chart here. So dean delegated, then a cap review, dean delegated, then a cap review, unless one of these is an acceleration. And if it's acceleration, then it is going to be reviewed by cap.
Could I ask if
You may.
to review? Thank you so much. To review again, the where like assistant and associate overlap, like the 5 and 6. I'm not sure I understand what it means for them to overlap.
So what it means is that you could be a professor. Let's just look here. You could be an assistant professor step 4. And if you wanted to go up for tenure, you could, as a step 4 assistant professor, you could go up for tenure. And if you were successful, you would move from this step 4 assistant to a step 1 associate. So you're just moving one step down this up ladder. We really should invert this chart, frankly. But anyway, if you weren't ready to go up for a promotion, then you're going to go from a step 4 to a step 5. But a step 5 pay level is the same as a step 1 associate. So that's where there's overlap on these ladders. A step 5 overlaps with step 1 associate, and a step 6 overlaps with step 2 associate. So let's say you were hired as a step 3 and you went from 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6. Now you're a step 6 and you're going to go up for a promotion instead of a merit. That promotion, you're going to go from a 6 to a step 3. You're not just going to move in a parallel fashion. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure. And then just to beat a dead horse, or whatever the phrase is, if you were an associate step 4, that's the same step as a full professor step 1. So if you were at a 4 for 3 years, your promotion would be from 4 to a full professor step 2.
So Brian, just I'm sorry, the updated rule from this year is that all the regular merit is dean delegated except 5 to 6 and step 9 to above scale.
So so thank you for pointing that out. This one with the arrow is still cap required, and this one with the arrow is cap required, and this one is no longer. We're gonna have to fix this
Right.
chart, but this one's no longer cap required. This can be dean delegated.
Right.
All right. So thank you for that clarification. And Kyoko, if you'd make a note to email me that I can update this slide.
Oh, I actually said, okay. Yeah.
So okay. All right. So evaluation criteria, teaching, research and creative activities, service, and clinical competence. So we covered that briefly, and we'll go into each of these in a bit more detail. So what documents do you need? The AP10. So that is the primary review file. And if you're going to CAP, you need to have filled out an AP10 form. And on the AP10, we'll cover all information during the review period. And your analyst is going to be giving you an email saying the review period is from this date to that date. So that's what should be on your AP10. You should also include a CV, and that CV would have your entire career, not just the review period time. Outside letters only if it's initial appointment, a promotion, or going to professor above scale. And then you will be including teaching evaluations. So during the review period, up to 5 years old or less, and CAP wants to see 2 pieces of evidence of teaching. So they want to see a reflective teaching statement. They want to see evaluations from students. And they're going to want to see that in your reflective teaching statement that you are discussing your teaching evaluations and addressing any deficiencies that are brought out in those evaluations. Then you're also going to have a research and creative activity statement and a service statement. These can be 3 pages max for each statement. And if you are involved in inclusive excellence or diversity activities, CAP prefers that those inclusive excellence activities are included as part of your research statement or as part of your service statement. If you are doing something truly remarkable or different that doesn't fit in one of those categories, you can include optionally a separate inclusive excellence diversity statement, but is not required. As it says at the bottom here, CAP prefers to see that included in the AP10 and included in your research or reflective teaching statements. You have anything to add there, Mohammad?
Yeah, I was going to say, so there are some abbreviated processes that have been put into place for Senate where, maybe we'll go into that later, where the AP10 may not be required or a version of the AP10 may be included. So that may vary. For HS clinical, we are still utilizing the AP10, the CV, outside letters were necessary. So for promotions and advancements to above scale, as Brian mentioned. Teaching evaluations, in terms of the statements, it's really the reflective teaching statement that is a requirement. Please brag about your teaching, but keep it less than 3 pages and be succinct because there are hundreds of files. But feel free to talk about your approach, your philosophy, any alterations in response to feedback that you're making, etc. For HS, it's not required to include a research, creative activity, or service statement at the dean's office level. But keep in mind, some departments, for their own internal deliberations, may require that. So while you might hear us saying that's not required for your review at the dean's office level, your department may actually require you to do that. So, we don't want to overstep too much and contradict the departments. So, but when it comes to the dean's office level, we're really looking for a reflective teaching statement. And no additions on the inclusive excellence statement. That's exactly correct. Prefer to keep it in the AP10. If you have a substantial contribution that you want to expand on, you want to write a separate statement, that's perfectly fine too.
All right, and I will point out please put your questions in the chat if you have them, or just unmute yourself. We're a small enough group. There is a question in the chat about accelerations, and there's a slide later on in this presentation specific about acceleration. So we'll get to that when we get to it. But thank you for your question about what is an acceleration and when should we consider them. So we will indeed come to that. So the AP10, make sure you're using 2022-06 version. Unless Kyoko tells me there's an even newer version than that. Make sure you're using the most up-to-date version of the AP10, and that's broken down into various sections that we'll go over in just a moment. So employment history, teaching, creative activities, professional recognition, clinical competence and service, and then university service and additional clinical competence.
Yeah, the newest one is 2024 September 09. And but Nimisha and I can go into the details in June when we do the how to fill out AP10 webinar.
Yeah, so we will have as another monthly on Mondays, we're having a session specifically on the AP10. So stay tuned for that. All right, so teaching, mentoring, teaching is absolutely essential for advancement. And in fact, if you're going to go up for an acceleration, you need to be outstanding in 2 or more categories. And so teaching is very often that category. Teaching, as I mentioned before, includes not just the classroom, but also laboratories, wards, the OR, and the clinic, clinical teaching of med students, residents, and fellows. And more weight is given to teaching activities where their evaluations are provided. So hopefully your department is sending out evaluations that are done anonymously and you're getting feedback on your teaching. If you're not sure that's happening, make sure you talk to folks in your department and ask for that to happen. I've known some cases where people will do their own survey because they don't have that happening. So if you are not sure, then collect your own data. But CAP and the dean's office prefers that data is done by the department so that it's anonymous and can provide honest feedback. In addition, your teaching is not just the classroom teaching, but can be research mentoring of graduate students and postdocs, undergraduates, folks in your lab, junior faculty. Mentoring of junior faculty can also be considered as part of mentoring, but it's best to put that in the service section later, which we'll get to in a moment. So what are the pieces of evidence you would use for teaching? One is going to be a reflective teaching and mentoring statement showing that you're engaging with teaching, you're involved with teaching evaluations, whether that's from peers or from students. that your reflective statement acknowledges any issues and how you are addressing them. And if there are major issues, that hopefully that's going to be addressed in the department letter as well, that you've gotten additional mentoring, or you went and took a class in some techniques to help you with comments that the students have given you that need to be improved. Informal mentoring is also appreciated by CAP. So if you're involved in informal mentoring, not just in a large lecture hall, but describe those efforts and activities. Also, your teaching statement should describe the time commitment. What is the impact and what outcomes have happened from that type of teaching? So be sure to include that in your reflective teaching statement. Also be sure, though, to maintain confidentiality. Don't be naming names or giving identifying characteristics of your mentees in that. There's a link here for that in mentoring document form and example. And then also there should be student evaluations of teaching. So hopefully from the last 5 years or so, it's important that you have a good response rate so that we're not just surveying a small number of students. And then it's important that there's student comments as well in those. So CAP will look at those and will look at if there's gender or ethnicity issues or biases in your teaching. And if those come up, your reflective teaching statement should definitely cover how you plan to address those deficiencies if there are any. Anything to add there, Mohammad?
No, I agree. I think we're probably going to go into how to list DEI contributions later, so I'll save my comments for that.
Sure. All right, so research and creative activity, especially if you're in the Senate series, not only should you be listing your contributions, but you should be explaining your role and your impact. So you can't assume that CAP or even ARAC necessarily will know the impact of the various venues that you publish in or the societies that you're a member of. So be sure to give information about that, like the impact factor of the journal, or the number of people that are involved in a particular society that you are giving a presentation in. If you're involved in collaborative work, definitely state the meaning of the orders of author. Is it alphabetical, like in physics? Is it based on the role or senior authorship? What was your role in this contribution? If you're a middle author, maybe you're a middle author because you have a set expertise. You provided a data set, and without that data set, the paper couldn't be published. But CAP can't know that. It has to be described in your research statement and in some notations on your AP10 so that everybody understands what your role was. And then also provide some context of what's the importance of your research or creative activity. What population is it addressing? What's its impact on society or the campus in general, or a patient population? And also good examples of success of being respected for your research and creative activity is, are you getting grants? Grants are a mark of stature and demonstrate your scholarship, particularly if they are national or state level grant reviews. If you do list your grants and you're putting a dollar figure there, what is that dollar figure? Is it the direct cost, the indirect costs? What percent of that cost goes to your program as opposed to your collaborators if it's a multi-PI grant? Try to clarify all of that information. Peer-reviewed publications. So if you're in a Senate series, you shouldn't just be publishing. You should be publishing in peer-reviewed original research journals, publishing case reports or review articles, particularly if they're invited review articles and or book chapters. So CAP, particularly if you're for promotions, CAP is looking for first authorship or senior authorship, that you're a corresponding author, that you're involved, you're an integral part of that research. As I mentioned, middle authorship should be documented or explained. What is it that you contributed to this piece of research? And then provide evidence of the impact, either author or paper level metrics. They're not required, but you could provide an H-index for your work. You could provide eyesight or relative citation ratio of the particular journals in individual fields, or the impact factor of the journals that you're publishing in. And that's something that really your department, you can point it out, but your department and their reflection and their comments on your research, they should be talking about the quality and the impact of your work and understanding what that work is and contextualizing that impact on the field, because you can't expect CAP to understand all of that without it being put into context for them.
There are instances, especially in clinical NHS, where we may tend to put trainees as first authors. And so I think it would be reasonable to explain if that first author is a medical student, is a resident, is a trainee under you, the level of mentorship that you provided, if any. Not to overlap too much with the mentorship category, which we'll go into and we've talked about a little bit under teaching, but just to kind of contextualize the authorship order once again and your role and what the significance is.
It's a great point. And you could, in fact, on your CV or your AP10, you could use an asterisk or a cross or a number symbol to denote whether this is a resident or an undergraduate or a member of your laboratory, a graduate student. So you can highlight that in your CV even. Your research and creative activity includes extramural funding, particularly if you're the PI, multi-PI, or a site PI, please clarify that. Also, if you're involved in investigator-initiated clinical trials, what protocols have been in IRB approved, but if the trial hasn't started yet, but you've done the work to get the trial authorized, that should be denoted as part of your creative activity. If you're ClinEx or an adjunct faculty, it'd be great if you publish in peer-reviewed journals, but also you might be making case reports or writing review articles and book chapters, or developing new teaching materials, website content, being involved in clinical trials. All of these are considered important creative activities and should be highlighted in your AP10. Anything to add there, Mohammad?
Nope, very thorough. Thank you.
Okay. So professional recognition and service activity. So have you received any awards or honors, any media coverage? Are you involved with professional organizations or clinical organizations? Are you on editorial boards or manuscript reviews? Are you a grant reviewer for nonprofits or the NIH or the Department of Defense? So please indicate all of that service that you do as professional recognition. You're giving invited lectures. You should be keeping track of the presentations and at professional meetings or other institutions that you give, tracking all of your accepted abstracts and posters at professional meetings. And again, as Mohammad pointed out, noting which one of those your students are authors on as well. Is there any community service outreach activities you do? And what mentorship of other faculty are you involved in? And then for clinical competence, evidence of provision of high quality patient care. Are you listed in Best Doctors USA? Are you board certified? Do you have any leadership roles in your division or clinical programs as well? And Mohammad, go ahead and elaborate.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I was going to say for HS faculty, this is an area that often gets underpopulated in terms of contributions by faculty. So some ideas and things to keep in mind if you are finding difficulty finding activities in here. Manuscript reviews, contributions to journals. If you are contributing to podcasts or webinars, for example, these are activities that can be included because they do give an indication of your professional competence and recognition by outside entities. Same thing with professional meetings and societies. So I think it's important to kind of take a look here and see where you can survey your CV, your contributions, and definitely include things even if they seem somewhat, I don't want to say trivial, but if they don't seem to be high impact to you, being part of professional organizations that are in your specialty do point to your engagement at a national level or regional level. So it may feel like you're just, attending and going to those meetings, but that engagement is important for recognition in terms of your ability to remain engaged. So I think there are certain things, again, where HS faculty tend to underpopulate this section, and it's important to try to find as many activities in your CV or in your day-to-day that you can use for this section. And if you find that you are deficient, these are areas hopefully that we can help you through faculty development to improve on.
Great point there for faculty development. Thank you, Mohammad. University service, next category. So service can be at the department level, then the School of Medicine level, then campus-wide, UC-wide, and then finally national and international. So as you move up the ranks and you go from assistant to associate, associate to full, CAP is going to want to see that your service level is expanding as well. So if you're on a hospital committee under School of Medicine, if you're department chair, division chief, part of an organized research unit, and of course, it should be noted that less service is expected of assistant professors, but not zero service. You should be getting involved and talk to your chair or talk to an associate dean about what service can you do that is getting you involved in the university, in the department, or in the school, but is still useful and value to your career, so that you're getting something out of it other than just doing service. But as you move up the ranks, you got to do service even because it's just service. So that's just part of the game. So as leadership is expected at higher levels, campus wide, and then even shared governance through the whole UC system as you progress up the ranks. Service activity. So you need to give the context. CAP is looking for the level of leadership, the amount of effort, and what your main contribution is. So not just a whole list of things, but your service statement, or on the AP10 form, you should be denoting that this thing that I do, it's quarterly, it's once a month, it's weekly for an hour, it's weekly for 4 hours. So there's no way for someone to know what your level is, whether you're compensated or not, or if you're volunteering. You should let CAP know what that is. How many papers are you reviewing a year? How many blog entries or journals are you involved in, and what you're doing? So, and as we noted before, the higher your step, the higher your level, the higher the level of service will be expected of you. All right, so as we stated earlier, you don't need to write a separate diversity statement. CAP prefers that you indicate your inclusive excellence and/or diversity work where appropriate in the AP10 form or in your research statement. If you really feel like you have a specific program that you're passionate about, then you can write a separate inclusive excellence and diversity statement if you so choose. And it's also helpful that however you approach this, that your contributions to inclusive excellence are highlighted or discussed in the department letter. And just to reiterate, no names, no personal data. In fact, that'll delay your file if you include names of people that you've done outreach to. Anything else to add there to Mohammad?
Yeah, this is the part I wanted to clarify, because some people in the past have said, well, how do I indicate that I'm providing a service in the DEI realm? You can see, is it more in the teaching category? Is it more in the research category? Are you doing, population level research that may help certain populations or others, or may investigate disparities in healthcare, for example? So pick the section that is most appropriate for the activity that you're doing. And it's okay to say, I believe, unless my colleagues disagree, that you are working on advancing or benefiting or studying different subtypes of what might be of groups that might be considered under the DEI realm, but don't mention names, as Brian mentioned. Really, we're not looking to say, well, I have a lab that's quite diverse, and I'm trying to advance folks from this background or that background. That's reasonable, I think, to say I'm trying to, give opportunities, for certain populations maybe who may have been disenfranchised in the past, but we don't want to list name. We don't want to see names listed, basically.
Right. Okay. So kind of just as a summary slide here, if you're inline, in residence, or adjunct, your promotion to associate professor requires research, teaching, professional activity, and service. If you're adjunct, you only require 2 of the 3 activities. So research and teaching, or teaching and service. You don't have to do all 3. And then as you go from an assistant to associate, and then associate to full professor requires not just regional or national recognition, but now national to international highly meritorious service, and excellence in your professional activity. So you're going to have to be expanding your sphere of interaction and maybe adding leadership roles as well to move up higher in the ranks. And then for ClinX, promotion to an associate professor requires local or regional reputation in creative activities, excellence in teaching, and appropriate university service, and distinguished accomplishments within your clinical specialty. And then as you go to promote to a professor, that requires regional or national reputation in creative activities, excellence in teaching, highly meritorious service, and superior accomplishments within your clinical specialty, and perhaps a leadership role in the department or in the hospital or on a hospital committee as well. So what if you need more time? So if you can ask for a reappointment at assistant professor level. You get a formal review, but no merit increase or promotion. But if you have 2 consecutive no actions, then you're going to have an action plan and subsequent progress reports to follow up. If you use a stop the clock, now the COVID stop the clocks are over, so we really should take this off the slide, but you should still have a stop the clock for a personal or a family reason, for you're taking care of an elderly parent or somebody who's sick, and you would file a stop the clock for that as well. And you can also ask for a deferral if you're an associate or a full professor. If your last review was positive, our merit or promotion review can be deferred for up to 1 year. Anything else to add there, Kyoko or Mohammed?
Nope, that covers it.
Yeah.
All right, Kyoko?
No, I mean, I have nothing to add. Yeah.
All right, then should I accelerate? So the thing, it really depends, of course, on what you're looking to accelerate. Is this a 1-year acceleration, a 2-year, or you're trying to accelerate over an entire step? And so generally, faculty to accelerate, they have to be outstanding. That is to be far above the typical accomplishments in 2 out of 3 areas. And in those 2 out of 3 areas, one of them has to be research, the other being teaching or service. And you have to be at least satisfactory in that 3rd area. And then your department letter is going to have to be very clear and analytical about the rationale for your acceleration. So what are the 2 areas that the department and you feel you're outstanding in? And then, contextualize and quantify that of, if you're going up for a 2-year acceleration, then you need to have done 2 years worth of work in that 1 year's time period, or a full step. If it's a 3-year step or a 4-year, you need to have accomplished in that period of time everything that someone else would have accomplished using the normal amount of time at that step. So it's not an easy thing to do. And CAP will consider excellence in diversity and inclusive excellence as a criteria for acceleration if the other areas of review are also similarly strong. So it can't cover up a weakness in teaching or research. And I believe the next slide, has some data for you about accelerations, that the expectation is that your research and creative activity is required. So your volume and your impact is twice as high as that of a colleague. And that your second area in service, for example, that your volume or impact was twice as high, and with evidence of leadership in some service area. Teaching, you can't exactly double the amount of teaching, so your volume is not going to be twice as high, but your impact should be twice as high, or your impact should show evidence of leadership or a new course development or something like that. So if the departmental support for your acceleration is mixed, the department should have 1 vote on the acceleration and record that vote, and then a second vote on just the normative or regular action without acceleration, in case that you don't make satisfactory vote on the acceleration part. So just to give you an example, from 2023, 31% of cases were requested an acceleration, and CAP accepted essentially half of those, or 16% of cases indeed got an acceleration. So that's different on 1 year and 1 step acceleration. So if you're going for a 1 year acceleration, that is the lower hurdle. It's still an acceleration, but it's a lower hurdle. And so 77% of those cases were successful. But if going for a full step, which is typically a 2 or a 3 year acceleration, that only had a 50% acceleration. So it depends on how much of an acceleration you're looking for as well. Mohammad.
I would highlight a few things. So the idea is, as mentioned above too, and on the previous slide, is that we're looking for outstanding contributions in several areas. The other areas are not supposed to be deficient. So
Yes.
satisfactory is minimum. And the University of California being the University of California, satisfactory performance is usually held to the standard of excellence. So one is expected to be excellent and then outstanding and exceptional in certain categories. So somebody maybe who, what we don't want to see is somebody who might be compromising their teaching quality to be very prolific in the research side of things and then use the research and service to advocate for an acceleration, but their teaching evaluations, for example, are below average or below their peers. That would not count as a positive and it would actually potentially negate the other two exceptional categories. That's the first point. The second point I'd make is that the bar for acceleration goes up, the higher one moves up. So it should, in theory, be slightly easier to accelerate, or the bar should be held at a certain level to accelerate at the assistant rank, but those same contributions may not clear the bar to accelerate at the full professor rank. So I may be successful in accelerating from step 1 to step 3 as an associate professor, but if I continue the exact same contributions in my next cycle, I need to do more and I need to raise the bar for myself to be able to get an acceleration if I'm looking to accelerate later in the future. So some people are fortunate to have positions or contributions or activities or grants that last many, many years. But what got an acceleration during one cycle will not necessarily secure an acceleration in subsequent cycles once we move up the ranks.
Well put. And Kyoko, anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that's really well put. Yes.
All right. So basically, my advice to folks is to be judicious about asking for acceleration. If you feel you deserve one, you should definitely talk to your chair about it. But the success rate is not extremely high. It takes extra work. And the best advice would be if you're going to go for acceleration, go for a 1 year acceleration and not attempt to go for acceleration across an entire step. That's going to be much harder. All right, so CAP could deny your promotion or merit, then what? As per normal processes, faculty who go up for promotion to associate rank can add new materials until the final decision date. So even if an internal committee like ARAC or CXAC has seen a file, if new papers get published or a grant is received, that information can always be added to your file and forwarded to CAP if CAP hasn't voted on you yet. And decision letters from CAP requesting additional information are optional, not mandatory, but it could be if there's a disagreement or confusion between CAP and the school of recommendation, they might ask for additional information so they can evaluate their decision. So you can accept their decision or withdraw your file and resubmit the following year if you have 1 more year left on that 8-year rule, for example. So you do have to time that correctly. Kyoko, anything to add about CAP and their tentative decisions?
No, and then it's not mandatory. So sometimes they may not ask anything and then just make a decision. So just yes.
Okay. And so what about switching a series? My activities or duties have changed. So I want to switch from HS to ClinX, or I want to switch from ClinX to HS. So a change in series is a new appointment. And so this is you're going to have a new faculty title, and it has to be because your duties have changed. not because you want to be in a different series, but literally you are doing the duties now of a different series. And so being in that series makes more sense. So this is going to require an academic review, possibly and often a competitive search is required. And very important to note here is that you can only change series once. So if you are HS and you go to ClinX, then ClinX is where you're going to be. You can't decide a couple years later that you don't really fit the ClinX series and you want to go back to HS. That's no longer something you can do. So ClinX is a series. We mentioned it briefly, but where clinical duties are paramount, but there's also teaching and creative research output. So while it's not tenure track and the research expectations are not quite the same as for tenure track faculty, there are still research expectations. So a ClinX faculty is expected to lead or have a significant intellectual or substantive contribution to a research program or some other creative activity. Maybe they're involved in leading clinical trials. And so while the clinical trials may vary, they're involved in trials significantly, and that's part of their creative output. And very often that clinical activity is part of their creative activity as well, that they're involved in clinical translational projects, health outcomes, case studies, and educational scholarship. They could be involved in bench research, but that is a little less likely for the ClinX series. Extramural support is desirable, but is not a requirement of ClinX. And while it's not a tenured position, it does confer membership in the academic senate and all of the privileges and duties associated with being an academic senate member. So again, switching series only once is allowed. If you're switching to ClinX, your creative activity related to your clinical specialty is a necessity, in addition to clinical teaching, service, and research excellence. And your leadership and peer recognition in that creative activity needs to be recognized. If you're switching to in-residence is a yearly contract, and your salary needs have to be covered by grants or clinical activity or other outside funding and not state-based funding. And the requirements in residence are the same as in inline series as well. So this is a difficult series to maintain. If you're switching to an inline series, that is very difficult because the department has to have an FTE or a full-time equivalent line in their allotment in order to hire someone as an inline faculty. And then if you're trying to switch to inline series, there's going to have to be a search, and you to apply to that search. And then you're going to be evaluated on research, teaching, and professional activity, professional service, all involved in that inline series. If you're switching to an adjunct series, you only need to cover your own salary, and you only need 2 out of the 3 categories, so research and service or teaching and service as your main activities. And then it should be noted here, so if you're switching to ClinX, your clinical service and clinical teaching are the key requirements, and then you're going to be wanting to increase your clinical excellence and your reputation in your clinical field in order to advance in your career there. So just as highlighted here, switching between in-residence and inline does not restart the clock, and restarting a clock means you cannot include your accomplishments in a previous series on your AP10 in your subsequent review. Your CV, of course, would have all of your accomplishments, but not your AP10 form. So you need to think very carefully about switching series. Anything to add there, either Kyoko or Mohammad?
No, just consider it wisely.
Yeah.
All right, duly noted. Junior faculty mentoring mechanism in the School of Medicine. So you are, as you join the School of Medicine, you should be assigned a faculty mentor. That should be in your department letter. There should be departmental mentoring committees. That depends on your department. And there's, of course, associate deans for faculty development. Myself and Kyoko Yokomori, who's involved with the mid-career evaluations and reviews. If you're in an FTE line, you can be involved in observing the ARAC committee that goes over merits and promotions. If you're CXA, if you're ClinX, You can attend CXAC meetings, which do the same thing for Clinex. And of course, you're invited to attend as many of the monthly on Monday faculty development series as you can. NIH Boot Camp is available for getting training in grant writing and grant submission. You're encouraged to attend a faculty success program offered by the National Center for Faculty Development. And there's also the School of Medicine Mentoring Committee prior to your MCA, which covers inline and residence faculty. And there's a subcommittee covering Clinex mentorship as well. So if you're interested in any of those committees, reach out to the respective associate dean and ask to get hooked up with those committees to help you advance. So this will be included on our series, useful, helpful website links to go to. And finally, that's the end of the formal presentation, but we're of course open to any questions you may have. So just unmute yourself and feel free to ask a question. Or type it in the chat box. And while we're waiting for the timid and shy, I'll just point out that next month, the February 10th is Understanding Faculty Compensation with Rebecca Brasuelis and TJ Kennedy. So learn all about finances and pay your salary. And then the next month is Pathways to Division Chief, Chair, or Medical Director. So advice from leadership on how to get into leadership. And then following would be Teaching Professionalism in Medicine. So I saw a question roll by. Is it possible for folks to have 50% in one series and 50% in another? And how do the evaluations work for those positions? A difficult question. So yes, it is possible to be 50%. You could have a 50% in line and 50% in residence, for example. That is a possibility. And then generally you're evaluated, on your same 2-year cycle or 3-year cycle, depending on the rank, you're evaluated as having to at least accomplish 50% or more of what somebody in that normal series has to accomplish themselves. So the trouble is that bar can be higher than just a simple 50%. It's difficult to evaluate what 50% is. So 50-50 appointments do exist, but how to evaluate this is difficult. We have a question. Jeff Abbott, you want to add to that?
Yeah, just that, I mean, you were correct, but also inline and in residence series have exactly the same criteria. So the most common 50-50 positions, I think, are inline, and in res, they both have the same criteria. So you'd be, that's fairly simple.
Yeah, you just would have perhaps less startup funds.
Exactly, but the criteria are the same. So,
all right. So Emily Chen asked, for HS faculty, how are accelerated files being reviewed by CFAC? Is the file being compared to other accelerated files from other clinical departments?
So that's a good question. There is a lot of heterogeneity, of course, in HS faculty through departments, through contributions, activities, practice patterns and scope, etc. So CFAC is comprised of many different individuals from many different departments that reflect many different practice types and environments. So CFAC itself has its own context of having seen hundreds of files over the years and being able to compare across the bar and standard that they've set themselves. In addition, the departments that we don't emphasize this enough sometimes, but the department letter is crucial, because the department letter allows the department to give an assessment of a faculty member's file in the context of other faculty members within that department. So what makes this person stand out? What makes this person's contributions outstanding instead of excellent? A lot of times that has to do with the bar and metric and context within the department. So the HS files that are submitted for acceleration really start with the faculty member putting forward their contributions to allow their department to contextualize those contributions and really rate them compared to the normal contributions within the department. That then comes to CFAC, that attempts to normalize, those contributions relative to all departments that they see and across time. So it's not so much that, this year we're going to pick these 10 files for acceleration and not the rest. it really it starts with the faculty member putting forward their materials, the department context, and then CFAC bringing it to a close by assessing it across the entire school, irrespective of the departments coming from.
All right. And so Maria asks, is there a way to schedule one-on-one consultation to identify areas of improvement on the CV? So Namisha Parekh is not here at the moment, but she's the Associate Dean for Faculty Development for non-Senate faculty. And I'm sure you could send her an email and set up an appointment with her. But there's also there's a HS Faculty Mentorship Committee that you could ask. I don't know who Mohammad is chairing that, but you could ask that. And if that doesn't work, send me an email and send me your CV, and I'd be happy to give you input on it. So.
Yeah, Namisha has the most up-to-date information, but that should be Emily Chow.
Okay. And then someone says, I'm a new analyst and we have a VCF employee who's sick and needs a stop the clock. I'm told she still has to go up for this review action. Where can I find the form? She's an HS Assistant Clin series and is required review during 24-25.
So I would recommend reaching out to the dean's analyst that's servicing your department, because we need a little bit of clarification. Volunteer clinical faculty is what I'm assuming VCF stands for. That's different than HS series. So we might need to clarify that a little bit in terms of, are they in the volunteer series, or in the HS series, are they HS without salary? That'll determine what's required and how much leeway there is.
All right. Well, that's a great set of questions. Nice attendance. We didn't lose anybody until the end there. If you have any more questions, of course, you can email the appropriate dean. And you can also tell your colleagues to check out the website where this seminar will be posted in a week or so. So thanks everyone for coming. Thank you, Mohammad, Kyoko, and Jeff for attending, and Sophie Wong for organizing all of this and keeping us on schedule and making the recordings available. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you. Bye.